Hello everybody. What I want to have a look at now is the natal chart and also the transits and solar arcs for Bill Clinton. Now, why I've decided to look at Bill Clinton's chart is I believe that the court, the judge in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, has ruled that a vast tranche of documents are going to be unsealed in 2 weeks' time. It could be longer if there are hold-ups in the circuit courts or objections from certain Jack and Jane Does in these documents. But the documents will reveal about 100 names of many elites, and I'm just wondering how this will impact on certain people who, are key to this. Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, for example. Then I'd like to throw into the fact that you guys may have recently heard of the suicide of Steve Bing. Now, people who live in the UK would have known that Liz Hurley, who used to go out with Hugh Grant for many years, she was famous for the Versace safety pin dress, a model for Estee Lauder. She had a child with Steve Bing. The relationship ended a long time ago. He's an American billionaire. He jumped off the 27th floor of an apartment building in Los Angeles. Now, it's believed that he was heavily involved with Epstein. He was also a big funder of the Clinton Foundation. I'm wondering if maybe his name was in this list of 100 people. He knew kind of things were going to hit the fan or something like that, and he decided he needed an escape route. So let's just have a look at Bill Clinton. Actually, it's a fascinating chart to look at for a number of reasons, even natally. But we're going to see, is he going to be implicated? Because there was a suggestion that Ghislaine Maxwell has had in her depositions to answer extremely revealing questions about her sex life. In fact, her legal team was complaining that these questions were incredibly intrusive and almost unnecessary. And during the questioning about her sex life, two names were coming up, and that's Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew. So I did do the chart of Prince Andrew a number of months ago, and I said that this is going to be really squeaky bum time for him. And I thought karma was coming to get Prince Andrew, and that this would be a very difficult year for him. So let's have a look at Bill Clinton's chart. Now look at this here. Look at all these planets in the first house. And here we have 4 planets in Leo. If you look down at his aspects, you'll see there's hardly any squares. Only a square between the sun and the moon. They've listed their moon square Pluto. It's extremely wide, beyond 8 degrees, so I'm not including it. They've also listed a Saturn square to Jupiter, which is so wide that I'm not including it. There's loads of conjunctions and trines. There's sextiles, including Sun sextile Jupiter. I mean, this is one lucky son of a gun. He's led a charmed life, hasn't he? This is such a fortunate chart in so many, many ways. I mean, we've got the moon, which is exalted in Taurus. We've got the sun dignified in Leo. We also have Venus in its own sign of Libra being dignified. Sorry, I hope I did say sun in Leo rather than Libra. This is just such a lucky chart. So let's have a look what we think. Okay. First of all, look at all these planets. By the way, the Mars conjunct Neptune is right on the ascendant, which I'm going to talk about because any conjunction on the ascendant is extremely important. So what about this? I mean, this packed first house with important planets in there, like Jupiter as well, Venus, the lucky planet in its own sign. It means early opportunities. And he really did have a lot of experience in his youth. He was always, I remember a quote by him saying, everywhere he went, he was always the youngest person there. He was the youngest governor of Arkansas. He was the 3rd youngest president of the United States. He was an early achiever. And that's what you often see when you get a packed first house like that. It's people who in the early stages of their life are just have an abundance of opportunity. They make things happen. They grab opportunities. They're motivated. They're alert to what's going on. They have a huge amount of charisma and self-confidence, and they pack an enormous amount into the first years of their life, meaning that they're often very early achievers. He's extremely self-aware. He's charismatic. There's definitely a huge amount of selfishness here. Look at all these planets on the side of the chart, right? There's a lot of selfishness. He's very willful, determined, and extremely competitive, even though Mars is conjunct Neptune, which does dilute competitiveness. It's there on the ascendant. Very, very competitive person. He's a strong personality. Jupiter in the first, he is a winner. He's got a winning mentality. He's so positive. I mean, you can see that why he's a kind of very likable guy with that Venus in the first, moon in Taurus. He's lovable, likable. I mean, if you didn't know more about him, you'd probably think he was the most terrific guy. No wonder he was popular with people. He's just got this full-on personality and, a lot of bubbliness, positivity, a can-do attitude, and that's probably why he was so successful earlier in life. I mean, he's got a powerful personality, he's full of energy, got a lot of stamina as well, and strong-minded, because there we've got Mercury conjunct Saturn. There's cold, hard ruthlessness, ambition, calculated, methodical. Of course, that I'm taking a rather negative view of Mercury Saturn there. It doesn't have to be that. You could probably see methodical, systematic, cunning, ruthless in a positive way as well, in a business sense. He's got high levels of desire. Let's say here we've got Venus is conjunct Mars. Funny, that's another person who loves Epstein that's got Venus conjunct Mars. I mean, Epstein had Venus conjunct Mars in Pisces, Ghislaine's got Venus conjunct Mars, Prince Andrew's got Venus conjunct Mars, and here we have good old Bill Clinton with Venus conjunct Mars. Again, this high sex drive. All these people are attracted to Epstein. Steve Bing actually had Venus in Aries, so I guess that's also a little bit similar to Venus conjunct Mars. He's got very high levels of desire, but he does feel entitled. But he is quite an inspirational character as well, because look, you've got this Jupiter trine Uranus, which is in the 9th house. It's just full of ideas. Let's talk about Moon in the 8th house. So I believe there have been some issues, irregularities to do with tax. And I mean, currently, if the Clinton Foundation was properly investigated, I'm sure loads of tax issues would arise, which is often the case when you have Moon in the 8th. Now, let's get back here briefly to Mars conjunct Neptune. When he was at school and university, he was very interested in music, playing the saxophone, and he actually considered music as a career before he determined that it would be law. But Neptune on the ascendant like that very often gives musical talent and creativity, so that was shining through. Now, his real father wasn't Clinton. It was someone called William Blythe II. He's William Blythe III, but he changed his name to Clinton at the age of 15. I think his real father was killed in a car accident before he was born. Clinton, the man with the name Clinton, was his stepfather, who was a drunken gambler. So when you get Mars and Neptune together on the ascendant, there's often an experience, personally or via someone else, of drink and things like gambling. And with here Moon in the 8th house, it does indicate that during his childhood there was something negative, there was disruption, there was a degree of fear. Look, you've got here Moon is square Sun, so he perceived his parents, his mother and his stepfather, not getting it on, being at odds with each other. Sun, being the father in Leo, could have been quite domineering, and I believe the father did beat her and dominated her. And he picked up that his mother was almost a little bit of a victim, and he picked up the negative atmosphere in the home, and that really shaped his personality. I think this contributed to him being a kind of fairly cunning, shrewd mover, because he had this early experience of manipulation, control, and unpleasantness in the home. He probably developed very strong coping mechanisms, which served him throughout his life. So when you have Moon in the 8th, there's also this attraction to the underworld, to secrets. And we know an awful lot of what's been going on with the Clintons involves sort of the Clinton crime syndicate, as they call it, drug running, mixing with the underworld, mixing with the Mexican cartels. I mean, all this is alleged in many books that are out there. So there's this attraction. He's also a very emotional person. This whole Moon in Taurus, Sun in Leo. He's got strong desires. He's passionate. He's driven. He has an intense need to fulfill himself and to seek pleasure as well. Often when Moon is in Taurus, he's kind of spoilt. So maybe he wasn't spoilt financially necessarily, but he probably was. His mother probably found spare cash to indulge him, to spoil him, because there's always a bit of spoiling when Moon is there in Taurus. And it does incline one to amass money, and it sometimes, encourages gluttony and avarice as well, and insatiable greed. Jupiter in the 1st is also sometimes indicative of greed, that he can just never have enough. And I tend to think it's like that with the Clintons. You hear about everything they get up to, and you think, well, haven't they had enough? They just never seem to get enough. So this Moon in Taurus, he has good instincts. He's got quite a strong ESP, but he's also very predatory. He's got these rather well-developed predatory powers, and he senses weakness in others, and he's drawn to what's dangerous and what's also base, and that includes within his sexual life. But definitely he senses vulnerabilities in others and plays on them. So let's again go back to Mars conjunct Neptune. Now, in many individuals, this indicates an ability to heal. You can do techniques like alternative healing, Reiki, hands-on healing, energy healing. Often it would mean that, but that's not a direction Bill Clinton has chosen. This does lead to a very magnetic, alluring, and interesting personality. He can almost hypnotize other people, bring them under his sway. He's got a very hypnotic way of talking. He's, like I say, he's magnetic, he's charismatic. That's where he's really been able to do a lot. Now, Hillary's got none of that, but he was successful because he does. Now, what this also indicates is an attraction towards the occult, and we know that comes up again and again. I know Virginia Giuffre and Maria Farmer have talked about lots of occult pictures, occult objects in Epstein's Florida mansion, and that Ghislaine and him were rather interested in dabbling in that. Now, this is often a sign of dishonesty. I know there's a famous astrologer in the UK, and he will not employ anyone who has Mars connected to Neptune in a square, conjunction, or opposition, because he believes it indicates underhand behavior, dishonesty, shadiness, misguided actions, often people who are very unrealistic. It can mean, like I say, underhand, deceptive. There can also be a lot of secrecy and subterfuge with these people, and they act in mysterious ways. I'd say that's pretty true of the Clintons. I mean, there's what you see on the surface and what you get underneath. They've got a finger in so many pies, and none of it is particularly kosher. It also indicates rather peculiar emotional desires and a tendency to be drawn towards exotic forms of romance. So we saw that as well with Epstein, with his Mars-Venus conjunction in Pisces, that he's rather stimulated by what's exotic. When Mars and Venus, as in this case in conjunction with Neptune, there is a penchant for what is innocent, for almost having sex with what is innocent. So that leads me to, like, younger people, right? So I'm just saying, could be. We don't know what's going to come out, but it could be suggested there. There's also an attraction to danger, certain amount of adventure, and again, this desire to have alliances with the underworld in order to further his ambitions. Mars conjunct Neptune often means treachery. And it can sometimes mean someone succumbs to the drug world or poisons. I believe Bill is quite a heavy drinker. Wouldn't you say? That nose? I think he's into his drink. As I say, there was the, his father was a fairly abusive character. So I think that's shaped him, bearing in mind that is on the ascendant there. Now, okay, I talked about how these planets together was also in common, the Venus-Mars thing, common to Prince Andrew, etc., etc. What about Jupiter in the first? Oh my gosh, again, like I say, some guys have all the luck, as Robert Palmer's saying. He's optimistic, sociable. That's definitely his legal ability, which apparently developed at school, where he was arguing the case for some guy from the Roman Empire in Latin class. So he seemed definitely to have a mind for law. Can be very benevolent. I think that's what he tries to project via his foundations. I mean, certainly super confident. He's a popular guy, provides social leadership, definitely attracted to politics, and he has divine protection. Like I say, this is such a lucky chart. That's why he's been able to get away with all of this. Just nothing seems to go wrong. Jupiter's really protected him so far, but the question is, will Jupiter continue to protect him? Often there's self-indulgence, a tendency to go overboard with drinking. He's not a partier, however. Apparently he liked to get into a party, find a girl, get the girl, leave, and get on with the more intimate stuff. He wasn't actually a party animal. However, he is a person who overindulges, both possibly in alcohol, sex addict. It could be. He overindulges in many varieties of different ways. Also has an exaggerated sense of entitlement and self-importance. I think we can see that. He felt the world was his oyster. It was damn well going to be his oyster. Jupiter here is trine Uranus, which is in the 9th house. The 9th house is ruled by Jupiter, so there's kind of a double whammy going on there, a double emphasis. Now, this can mean insight into the destiny of mankind. So, you do wonder, obviously, he would have been attracted to things like technocracy, transhumanism, because he is interested in where mankind is going and in terms of science, and using science to enhance our powers. Again, this shows an interest in the occult. It shows generally that he has good luck stemming from good karma in the previous life, and he tends to fall with his bum in the butter. He's very good at taking advantage of opportunities that arise because he tends to be quite inspired. He's very capable. He's very freedom loving. He thinks ahead, very future orientated, which also helps him to capitalize on opportunities. It indicates a life of travel, lots of adventure. It also indicates that he would be associated with lodges and a leader in something like a lodge or the occult. So obviously he was a Freemason, which it's probably out there, but I don't know that for sure, but that's what the chart is definitely showing up. Pluto, as you can see there, the power planet is in the 11th house, shows that he's got reformist tendencies in terms of his politics. Yeah, well, definitely Chinagate, they are on board with transforming America into China, so I'd say that's reformist. He has powerful friends. He's often been ruthlessly abused by his friends, but he can ruthlessly abuse them too. So it's a case of watch who you tread on your way up, because you might meet them again on your way down, and that's what could be happening. So Pluto there shows treachery from a friend. So if Ghislaine was once a friend, she now could put the nail in his coffin, because Pluto there indicates his downfall is via a friend. So if it's via Epstein or via Ghislaine, that's going to be his nemesis. That house, Pluto in the 11th. He uses groups and politics as a vehicle for his own ambitions. So politics wasn't the end, it was just a means to almost greater power. So even being the president, that wasn't it for him. That was just a means of amassing more and more and more power. It does show that he's capable of dynamic group leadership, but he's also can be quite manipulative and controlling in order to get his own way. Obviously Saturn in the 10th, the leadership, seeking status, drawn to public office, rising up the ranks very, very effectively. Now, let's have a look at some of his transits. Now, the first one that pops out to me is we have transiting Pluto. You see where Jupiter is in the purple. Jupiter's at 23 degrees of Libra, which means transiting Pluto at sort of 23, 24, 25. That's where it's hovering around this year of Capricorn, is squaring that. And at the same time, solar arc Pluto, which is here on the outer edge of the chart, solar arc Pluto is conjunct Jupiter. So we've got a double whammy of Pluto and Jupiter. What does that mean? Well, we'll carry on thinking about that, but it often means moving, a moving house. Is he going to move countries? Are him and Hillary going to go and live in Ireland to escape justice in America? Well, it's a question, but it often means but I'm interested, just to say, I'm coming back to that, but I'm very interested in it because, like, it's a double dose of Pluto on Jupiter. What else have we got? We've got transiting Uranus, which is traveling through Pisces, is squaring up, transiting Neptune, sorry, which is traveling through Pisces, is squaring up Uranus, which is in the 9th house ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is all about justice. So again, we're getting double whammy, triple whammy, should I say, of the legal system and justice. Does this mean justice is coming to him? Because in Ghislaine's chart, Jupiter was activated. It was activated in Epstein's, and it was in Robert Maxwell's when they got their day. So maybe justice is just coming in an unexpected way, because Uranus is the planet of surprises. So where is our transiting Uranus? Transiting Uranus is here, hovering around 10 degrees of Taurus. It's squaring Mercury, and it's squaring Pluto. Pluto, the stab in the back from a friend, is being activated. Very interesting. We'll come back to it. Solar arc moon is conjunct Saturn. Saturn is all about karma. When Saturn is in the 10th house, you can rise very high, but at the same time, if you've cut corners, if you haven't been honest, respectful, and played by the rules, Saturn can deal you a heavy blow. Saturn can take everything from you. Saturn can bring justice and bring everything crashing down upon your head. So it's very interesting that the moon solar arc moon is conjunct Saturn, because that certainly indicates to me a karmic cycle. Bearing in mind that transiting Saturn is around here, hovering on 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is also opposite Saturn. So when there's these Saturn cycles, like with Ghislaine, she was at the end of a Saturn cycle. She had Saturn conjunct Saturn when justice came to her. He's got Saturn opposite Saturn, which also could mean that justice is coming his way. So it's rather interesting. We just got to see if Jupiter doesn't end up protecting him. Saturn rules the 4th house, the house of home, the house of country, also the house of endings. So maybe he's come to the end of the road in terms of what he's been up to. So I think I've talked about that. So we've got solar arc Pluto active, transiting Pluto, both active, stimulating Jupiter. Now, there was one time in the past, his scandal with Monica Lewinsky, which I wanted to just briefly mention, because that was a time when he was impeached, so he was in trouble with the law, as it were. What planets were active then? Well, Saturn was actually square Saturn then. So again, we have Saturn opposite Saturn now. Saturn was square Saturn. Neptune at that stage was opposite Saturn. So we had Neptune activating Saturn, just as now we have Moon, which is in the 8th house. The 8th house, which also brings transformation, change, karma. Moon's also associated with those things when it's in the 8th house, and it's conjunct Saturn. So again, we have Saturn stimulated twice. And with Monica Lewinsky, transiting Uranus was opposite Pluto. So there we go. I suppose Monica Lewinsky, you could call it a friend, also got into trouble. So we have a couple of few similar things activated through the Lewinsky scandal. But what's happening now, I feel, is a lot stronger. Now, last time when Pluto, transiting Pluto in the 90s was, or in the early 80s, was conjunct Jupiter. That was in 1980. Transiting Pluto in Libra was conjunct his Jupiter. There was a sudden loss of popularity due to his policies, and he lost his gubernatorial position. So he was out of a gubernatorial role during 1980 and 81, and he won it back in 1982. So Pluto has in the past been associated with as a blip in the career, but I think this could be entirely more significant. So that's Bill Clinton's chart. That's my reading of it. I'll keep you updated. I'm going to watch for 2 weeks to see these names that come out, to see if Bill Clinton is implicated. I hear people saying that, Trump's running this through the FBI, and he wouldn't be letting it out if it was going to damage him. It's obviously going to damage his opponents, which is going to be very, very interesting to see. Should just add that Jupiter, solar arc Jupiter, is also conjunct the IC down here in Capricorn, which is interesting because it shows Jupiter as a planet being active again. Now, Jupiter, of course, is his lucky planet, but right now it could just mean justice, right? So there's just so much activity with the planet Jupiter, and maybe it'll mean some justice coming to Bill Clinton. But anyway, what a chart. I'm going to end off with a story that Tony Blair told. Now, I'm not keen on Tony Blair, and I'm not keen on Bill Clinton, but this is a rather good story, and Tony Blair told it jolly well. So they were at a big, I think it was a G20 summit, something of that nature, and I believe it was in South Africa, although Tony Blair didn't mention the country. And he said the host country had laid out all these kind of traditional tribal outfits for every world leader to put on for the photo call. So Tony Blair looked at the selection, and they're all hideous. So he chose the most ungarish one, what he thought the most attractive one, because they were all terrible. And he put that on. Later at the dinner, he was chatting to Bill Clinton, and he noticed that Bill Clinton had chosen the most hideous of all the choices. And he was curious. And he said, Bill, what made you choose that one? And I'm not going to do the accent because I can't do that southern drawl at all. I'll get distracted. But Bill said, well, he said, when the folks back home see these pictures, if I choose the ugliest, most garish, most awful outfit, they'll understand that someone made me wear that. If I choose one of the less bad ones, they might think that I actually chose that. I don't know. Anyway, like I say, kind of shows his more likable side, doesn't it? I do think this guy has an incredibly likable side. But then there's the absolutely greedy, devious side. I think he's allowed the greedy, acquisitive, power-hungry side of his relationship is epitomized by these selfish first house planets, this moon in the 8th, which just can't get enough money in Taurus. He's allowed that to override the more positive effects that he of his personality, because he certainly could have done a lot of good with this chart if he just made different choices. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. I did.